Family Leonardo, me Nasiladi on Multimedia, the CEO Voice of Salon. Today I come for talk to now, my family, make una continue to subscribe to our YouTube channel and share to our friends them. As we always try to bring for the latest news what they happen around salon, whether it be politics or any other news them what they happen or gossip what they bring out to live and direct. So please, my family, don't forget to subscribe and share to our friends them. You wanna touch the bell icon so that you don't miss any video we will try for bring out to now. So that's also we want make una don't forget also for subscribe to we TikTok channel on TikTok and also on Facebook or Facebook page or the Voice of Salon or also the on Instagram Voice of Salon. Please family, and don't forget to share. Okay, thank you now. Tata.
So we're gonna talk about the Trump tariffs, the relationship between China and the US, and why Trump is getting it wrong. And so I have divided the presentation into 4 parts. The first part is going to deal with what the current situation is, and then we would go back into history where America started, the economic history of America, the modern American history of the US, and how it got to where China became necessary in its game of things. Okay? But let's listen to this song about McKinley, because we're going to talk about William McKinley a lot, because during his presidency, that was when the US experienced boom and the US needed to expand. I don't want to use imperialist anything that has to do with imperialism, okay? Because I love America and I understand where this country is coming from. But let's listen to the song by in support of William McKinley. So McKinley became president in 1896. In that election, he won against Jennings Bryant, William Jennings Bryant. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a moment. So today, like I said, 4 parts. We're going to talk about what China is right now, the relationship between the US and China. And then we would go a little bit back to history from immediately after the Civil War, the economy of America. And then tomorrow, I would deal with and explain America towards the First World War, okay, and why there was a First World War. And then the third part will deal with why there was Second World War, okay, why there was Second World War. And then the last part would explain after Second World War, China fought alongside the Allied powers, America, Britain, France, right? And how did the relationship, how did that relationship degenerate to where it is over the years? And then we'll take it from the Mao Revolution from 1949 until when Mao Zedong died in 1976. Okay, and what happened after Mao died, how Deng Xiaoping succeeded Mao in 1978, and then how who convinced Deng Xiaoping to change from the Mao Zedong cultural revolutionary ideas to a more practical, realism, and how and why Deng Xiaoping carved the phrase, it doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white, as long as it catches the mouse, it's a good cat, right? So we'll come to that. And what did America, together with other European nations, how did they create strata, right? And within the global economy, they created strata. So American, all European economies live at the higher strata. And then they brought China to the middle strata, and then the rest of the world at the lower strata. So 3 stratas, right? First, the American and European countries, and that's why all of them have strong currencies. And then immediately after that, you have China, and then the rest of the world. And because of that relationship between, okay, let me don't go too far. Okay, let's just enjoy this music, then I'll come to the presentation. Okay? So today, part 1, tomorrow part 2, Friday part 3, and probably Sunday, because Saturday I have some engagement. If I have time, I would, but in the afternoon I'll be going out of town on a church temple trip. But if I don't do it on Saturday, then Monday I would now tie all the knots where America has come from and where it is and why decoupling with China has to be very technical, okay? Otherwise, that divorce, that marriage started in the 1980s after Deng Xiaoping visited the US, and I'll explain the dynamics, okay? And why I am making a case that where the US is, where European countries are, they need Africa. It doesn't matter what professor, it doesn't matter what any think tank says, what anybody says. As far as I'm concerned, I've done my research and I have arrived at the conclusion that where we are right now, the US needs to create a parallel global supply chain. Okay, they don't have to undo or decouple what is in China, the one they've built with China. Okay, and I'll tell you how that is impacting, that relationship, why Trump cannot succeed. Okay, if Trump insists, if he continues that path, he will lose the midterm elections big time, and then he will be impeached, and he will not finish his term. Okay, so he needs to just chill, and I'll explain to him. So let's enjoy the song.
When he gets to Washington, then the Democrats will run. For Republicans, McKinley paves the way. And then we'll all rejoice, for McKinley is our choice. We'll all be there rejoicing on that day. Singing, shout, 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 be up and ring. Shout, McKinley as we go. Do not for all be so, on our country to be so. Only if we gain protection that we know. What a glory that will be when we beat old Grover C. McKinley takes the road to Washington. What a welcome change there'll be, we'll regain prosperity. McKinley and protection marches on. Shout, 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 be up and ring. Shout, McKinley as we go. Do not for all be so, on our country to be so. All the aid to gain protection that we know.
Okay, so this was a campaign song for William McKinley, Henry McKinley, okay? So let me explain first what is the relationship between the US and China, okay? And I'll deal with that. I'll deal with what America needs to do probably on Saturday, like I said, or Monday. So in 1949, Mao Zedong started the Great Leapfrog Revolution. So what was the aim of Mao Zedong? He was the Chinese leader. So he wanted to industrialize China through agriculture, manufacturing, research, science, like any ambitious leader. Only through communism. What's communism? Communism is an economic policy where there is no private ownership of property. Everything is owned by everybody. Okay? And which is completely opposed to capitalism. And that's why I would explain the McKinley era. Okay? Probably I would go down to just after the Civil War, probably Rutherford B. Hayes, because McKinley, his commander, when he served in the U.S. military, his boss was Rutherford B. Hayes. Rutherford B. Hayes became president in 1876. Okay, that was the election Lindsey Graham made reference to during his speech at the Capitol during the January 6th insurrection, so-called insurrection. Even that insurrection, at a future date, I would explain that Donald Trump had nothing to do with that insurrection, okay, and how that is tied to China, okay. And if Donald Trump is not careful again, he won't finish his term. I would explain and why people think he was going to come after General Milley. If I was Donald Trump, I would, at some point, let me don't digress too much, because it's all tied. The information is too much, man. So now the communism is opposed to capitalism, right? Capitalism is private ownership. And in fact, because of private ownership of property, that was why the northeastern states fought the southern states to end slavery. Okay? So slavery, the northeastern state fought against the southern states, not on humanitarian grounds. When people say, oh, well, because slavery was inhuman, that was not really the major reason why the northern states opposed slavery. It was purely on economic grounds. Like Adam Smith said, it is not out of the benevolence of the baker that we have bread in the shop. It's not because the baker feels everybody's going hungry and we need bread. That's why he's making bread. No, he's making bread. He's making his bread to sell. So it was not out of the benevolence of the northeastern states that they fought slavery. It was because they were their economy was based on manufacturing. And the southern states, their economy was based on agriculture. So that means without advanced machinery, without mechanized farming, during that era, they needed labor, right? So because they needed labor, that's why they sent out, buying labor. So human beings were seen from a perspective of labor, right? That this is my tool. Instead of my machine, this is my tool that has to go and dig. This is my tool that has to go and plant. This is my tool. So when our forefathers were brought, they were they were not even considered as human beings. They were like tools. Okay, while the northeastern states were manufacturers. If slavery continued, slaves cannot own property. They cannot earn income. So that means the goods they produce, slaves will not have the money to make purchases, and they cannot own property right to anything being produced. So slavery was defeated. And then immediately slavery was defeated, there was a post-war Reconstruction era, which was Ulysses Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, and then came in two other presidents before McKinley, right? So capitalism is the right to own property, private property, and communism is against private ownership of property. So America and China, two different opposing economic systems. Okay? So that's where they diverged after Second World War. During Second World War, China fought alongside. Though China was not a major power, but China supported the great powers. So the revolution, the Mao Revolution, failed in 1976, woefully. About 3 million people are said to have died as a result of that revolution. So it was a spectacular failure. I don't want to go into how the US and other Western countries undermined the revolution and why the revolution collapsed. But the reality is over 3 million people, and that even led to cannibalism where Chinese were eating each other. And then you had a period of 2 years where there was fight between the communist bloc and nationalists. And Kissinger, who was the then Secretary of State, right? So when I see people like Marco Rubio, right, I'm like, where's the Kissinger? Where is the Kissinger? I can see that in Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio looks like an inexperienced chap. He doesn't even know what he's saying. He flip-flops. He says one thing, he says another thing, and I'll deal with that, right? And how that is impacting the shame Donald Trump is, how that is contributing to the shame Donald Trump is experiencing at the world stage. Yeah. So the Cultural Revolution failed, and Kissinger worked with the then leader, the founding father of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, to get Deng Xiaoping, who succeeded Mao Zedong in 1978, okay, to move away from that communist idea to be progressive and liberal, which he accepted. So that's why Deng Xiaoping couched the phrase, it doesn't matter whether the cat is black, it doesn't matter whether we go the communist way or we go the liberal way, as long as we fix China. That is what is important. That means we're doing good for China and our people. So in 1979, Deng Xiaoping was brought to the US. Yeah? 1980 was 1979 elections. Carter lost to Reagan, right? And Reagan took over power on January 6, 1980. So 1980, the early part of 1980, Deng Xiaoping was in America. Okay? Deng Xiaoping was in America. And after he came to the Americans, they sent him to the UK to meet with Margaret Thatcher in 1982. Okay? 1982, Deng Xiaoping visited Europe. So the economic program they wrote was where they created 3 stratas. So America and all European countries went to the higher strata, which I will call level 1. So that means they have stronger currencies, they have a higher standard of living. Okay? So what does that mean? So check all European countries, their currencies are strong comparatively to China, comparatively to any country in the world, to other countries in the world. So if you check the British pounds, it's very expensive. If you check the American dollar, it's very expensive. If you check the German Dutch before they went to the euro, it's very expensive. The European, right? So check the Australian dollar expensive, right? So what that did, it gave them the advantage of the purchasing power. So that means you can take, for example, and I'm just explaining the facts, okay? Because I want them to understand. I want America to understand how that they understand it, but probably they're not seeing it this way. They are not seeing it from the perspective I'm seeing it. So that the US and all European economies, okay, that took away the opportunity for them to sell to the rest of the world, if I could put it that way. Okay, because when you have a higher standard of living, so I'm sure you've heard how America protect the dollar, right? I don't have any problems with that. If I was an American, I would do the same. So I understand the perspective from which they wrote that theory, okay, that economic plan, and I'm not against it. But like every economic phenomenon is cyclical. You start at one point and you end at where you started. So like we say, life is cyclical. You start as a little child. You cannot talk, you cannot walk, you can't take care of yourself. Somebody has to take care of you. As you continue to live, you walk, you do things for yourself. As long as you don't die, you continue to live, you'll reach to where you started, where you can no longer take care of yourself. People have to take care of you when you're old, in your 90s, in your 100, in your 110, in your 120, right? So it's cyclical. So the US, where it started, that cycle has ended. So they need to write a new economic program. Otherwise, China will overtake them. So that's the paranoia in the West. So if you check, Australia has issues with China. If you check with Britain has issues with China. If you check America has issues with China, because they gave China an advantage. And I'll explain that. Okay. So you can take $1 million to Sierra Leone and probably come with 5-7 containers of cocoa or whatever mineral you want. And $1 million cannot actually open a gas station and stock the gas station with the fuel and mini-mart. $1 million cannot do that. So that means your $1 million gives you an advantage. If you went to Bolivia, if you went to Sierra Leone, if you went to a poorer economy, so you have that purchasing power. But then what that does to you again, on the other hand, is it wipes your ability to sell to that person. Say, for example, a police officer makes between $100 and $150 per month, 30 days. Okay? A police officer makes between $100 to $150 per month in 30 days in almost half of the countries in Africa. The countries that are doing well, like Ghana, Nigeria, probably between 150 and 200, not more than that. So an average Ghanaian who migrates to the US can make 150 to 200 bucks a day, right? So in one day, he has earned enough, as much as what it will take a police officer in Sierra Leone, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Ivory Coast, 1 month, 30 days. So that guy who earns $150 cannot pay anybody in America to make toothpaste, to make some things for him to buy. Right? So that means the possibility of anybody in the UK manufacturing for somebody an ordinary person in Nigeria, an ordinary person in Bolivia, an ordinary person in Ghana, an ordinary person in a poorer economy around the world. That possibility does not exist. Okay? So what they did, 1979, 1982, those two visits, they agreed. So half or more than half of the investments in China are owned by Europeans, America and Europeans. Those are European economies, investments. So instead of manufacturing those things here, they cannot. Because if they manufacture here, they cannot sell to the rest of the world. So they decided to carry those investments. One, that gave them the opportunity to sell to 1 billion population. Because remember, after the Mao Zedong revolution, China had over 1 billion population. That's 1 billion market. The people were poor. They didn't have good housing. They didn't have good shoes. Everything had already collapsed. So they were the most hungry or thirsty people for goods and services than any place in the world. Just like currently, Africa has the hungriest demand, right? The largest demand for goods and services than anywhere in the world. Second, probably to India. And that's why when they gave Rishi Sunak the opportunity, he messed it up because he doesn't understand, right? He became British Prime Minister. He couldn't even fix the economy. And that's how he was booted out. Because Kamala Harris also being part Indian, right? That's why you see the two great economies, European economies, the Britain allowed half Indian, half British to become British Prime Minister, but the guy didn't understand what was happening. Kamala too had that opportunity, but she didn't know what was going on, and that's why they were both removed. Okay, and I'm trying to make a case that we can do this together. Okay, so those investments. So now they took this investment to China. So every time you see an European company say, "Oh, China is copying our property rights, our trade secrets, right? They are manipulating their currency because they make their currency artificially low. Because when you have to sell, if your currency is too expensive, you are making it nearly impossible or very difficult for somebody outside of your economy to buy." So this is all the things that are at play, right? And I'll come to that when at the fourth part of my presentation, right? So when they went with this investment, people in the rural communities started coming to the cities for jobs. Then China started having skyscrapers, urban towns, and they started growing as the people had jobs. They continued to manufacture for the world. So the things the Western economies cannot produce and sell to the rest of the world, they went with those investments to China. So that's why the snake. There is a proverb about the snake when Donald Trump says the snake. Okay? Oh, tender woman, take me in. That was what China was. So China was that snake, and the cold, dying out of cold, frozen. And there is this tender woman, the US and European economies. Take me in. We are right because they were killing themselves. They were eating each other. Their moral revolution had collapsed. And then they took China in. And once the snake became comfortable, became warm, the woman went to work. By the time the woman came in, gave the snake some food. And what happened? The snake decided to bite the lady, the woman who helped her. So that's what China is doing to the US and European economies. They took them in, okay? And that's why they are trying to decouple, okay? But the way the Europeans are doing the decoupling will hurt them as well. Because this was a marriage, right, that was sweet in the 1980s. We were in Africa. You will see toothpaste. Probably different versions, different kinds of 20 or 40 different types of toothpaste made in China. So at that moment, the investment the Europeans, Americans and Europeans took to China was booming because the rest of the world was buying. So you see the radios, everything we were consuming right in Africa, their businesses in China were booming. So they could export and they could sell to the Chinese. For each time they exported, they hired more Chinese. So the Chinese had the purchasing power because they could find work, they could get paid, they could earn income. Okay? So as they were earning income, as they were finding jobs, their societies were growing, they were paying taxes, and then they had mega cities and they had skyscrapers. That's how they've become. To the extent that because you have more Chinese working in China out of American and European investments, okay, than Americans themselves in the US. The amount of jobs American investment, European investment have created in China is more than the amount of jobs created entirely in the European economy. So that means you have more Chinese contributing through taxes to their government, to their state, than probably the entire Western Europe. So if they want to make bicycles, they go and make the parts there. They don't only sell to the rest of the world. They themselves even consume. If you go to Walmart right now, you'll find out that 60% of the things they sell at Walmart are produced in China. If you go to every Dollar General, every store where people can go for little things they need in a house, like toothpaste, bathing soap, laundry soap, right? Those are all produced, 60% are produced in China. If you check your refrigerator, most of the parts are produced in China. If you check your dishwasher, most of the parts are manufactured in China. They only do the assembling in the US and other European economies. So in effect, they are the ones making China stronger, right? That to compete with them. So Donald Trump wants to kind of disengage. But if you want to disengage, you have to know that this is a marriage. It's just like a lady married to a guy for 30 years. For 30 years, this lady had believed in the husband. She works and hand all her paychecks to the husband so that the husband can lead as a good guy, make investment, and plan the future of the family. She loves and believes her husband 100%. 20, 30 years later, this guy, for no reason, wants to divorce the lady. The lady is gonna make it. That divorce very nasty. It's obvious, right? So that's what China is doing to the US. And the situation that's not happened to the US is, and now this is what I recommend. The US has to ensure that anybody wanting to be president must be reasonably knowledgeable about the world. So Donald Trump, his ignorance about the world is so vast. When I hear Donald Trump talking about Congo, when I hear Donald Trump talking about other places, I'm like, does this guy even understand where Congo can be located if they were to give him a map? Because you could see his ignorance. Okay? So if I'm a strategist, let's say, for example, I'm a Chinese strategist. Okay? I know America itself as a country has huge leverage. It's mighty, has enormous powers as a country. But then I am looking at your president, who is ignorant. And when he says things from the ignorant perspective, I know economically he would suffer so much disadvantage. So you see, I won't even mind him. I won't even mind his threat. So that's why China is not even bothered by all the threat Donald Trump is making, right? Because the threats are so myopic, they are so monofocal, they are so shallow. This is a relationship. Right? Take, for example, the pork industry. Okay? What we call pig. 55% of the pork raised in America, pigs raised in America, are sold to China. Why is that happening? It is happening because of the relationship that started in the 1980s to now. So when you want to decouple, without even thinking about the ramifications, right? So the opposing person sees Donald Trump as very shallow-minded. So they just laugh. And they wake up in the morning, they say, this guy doesn't even understand that this marriage, we're intertwined, right? So let's slam tariff on the import of pork. So that means more than half, 55%, of the pigs raised in Iowa can no longer be sold in China. So you see the shallowness. So you want to decouple, and you haven't made plans as to where else you're going to sell your pigs, your pork. So when China slams tariff on pork meat, coming from pork meat coming from Iowa, what happens to the Iowa farmers? It impacts them nastily. So this divorce, you want to divorce, it becomes messy even for yourself, Donald Trump. So the hype, the hope, the expectations Americans had that a second Trump administration would boom the economy, that's why it's not happening. It's not. Because now it will require that pork farmer to find another market. Is there a ready market, available market right now? Probably not. So the farmer has two options. Either to sell cheaper and auction, because the demand within the US is not as much as what they have produced, what they've, the pigs, the pork they've produced, right? And when production far outweighs demand, it leads to what? Price depreciation. Well, not really depreciation, but you lower the price for you to sell. Or the farmer has to keep the pig until the situations become better. So that comes with additional cost. In the first place, that's an animal that needs feeding every day. So instead of it being sold 2 weeks ago, the farmer is still feeding that pig every day. Every day, to be sold only for the same amount of price in the future as it would have been sold 2 weeks ago. It also means that the farmer either can no longer breed other pigs, additional pigs, or it will require him to build other pig pens so that he can raise more. So what if he's going to keep the pigs, right, and wait for stability in the market? What's going to happen to the money he owes to the banks? As a farmer, he cannot pay because sales hasn't taken place. So Donald Trump, that way you're going, it's wrong. And I'll come to what you need to do. Okay, so decoupling with China is not as plain as you guys are seeing it. If I were a strategist for the American government, I wouldn't even decouple, and I wouldn't even create chaos. There are other measures America can take, which I will not say here. Okay, because that's my intellectual property. You see, I don't need books. I don't know nothing. So is this new to America? No. And that takes me back to where America is coming from. At every given point, when people say, oh, this election between Obama and John McCain, Obama and Mitt Romney, right? It is everything. It determines where America is going. It will continue to build America, or it will crash America. No, it's not going to crash America. America is going to remain the same. Okay? For every consequential elections, not all elections are consequential. Okay? There are few elections in American history that are consequential. Okay? So, and I would take it to the 1896 elections, the one between McKinley and William Jennings Bryan. Okay, but before coming to that, let me give you a background. Americans know, the educated Americans know for sure. That's part of their history. So don't forget, like I said, the states that fought against slavery fought it not on humanitarian grounds, not completely, not much on even if it's on humanitarian grounds, very minimal. It's purely on economic, because it is not out of the benevolence of the baker, okay, that I have bread at the store. No, the baker supplying that store where I buy bread, what he's thinking about is how to make money and profit. It's not because Paunga is going to be hungry and needs bread in the evening or needs bread in the morning for breakfast that he's making his bread. So Paunga doesn't go to sleep hungry or doesn't spend the rest of his day hungry. So there is bread at Walmart or there is bread at that grocery store. No. So the state that sponsored the abolition of slavery and won that war did so because they wanted to emancipate the slaves, so the slaves can become free, so they can work, earn money, and own property. So when slavery ended, after the Civil War, so now they had what they wanted, right? So now slaves are free, they can work, they can earn money, they can make purchases, and they can own property. So what do you think was going to happen? Real production was going to start. So from the 1870s to the 1890s, that's why it's called the Gilded Age. When Mark Twain used that word, Gilded Age, it means something that shines on the surface as gold, it's gilded, but probably beneath it, right, there's some amount of trick or there's some amount of corruption, right? So it's called the Gilded Age. For every economy, and I tell people, Africa is going through, other countries have gone through, other continents have gone through. China used to be very corrupt. In fact, China, to fight corruption, they had to hang some of their leaders. Right? We haven't even reached that stage. So the Gilded Age, the post-Reconstruction election was the one 20 years before McKinley. So McKinley was born in Ohio. And McKinley served as a junior officer to Rutherford B. Hayes. He joined the army as a private with no title, with no promotion, and then left as a major. Rutherford B. Hayes, the guy who became president during the post-war Reconstruction election. That election, whoever wins this election, right, would manage the post-war Reconstruction. That election was held in 1876, and it was won by Rutherford B. Hayes. He lost the electoral college vote, but he had to persuade the southern states that when they send their electors, their delegates to Washington, like what Donald Trump wanted in the 2020 elections, and that's why Lindsey Graham said no. South Carolina is not a good place to set that example, because in 1876, 3 states in which Rutherford B. Hayes lost their votes went to Congress and cast their vote for Rutherford B. Hayes instead of voting in harmony and of the wishes of their people who voted. Because Rutherford B. Hayes promised that he will withdraw the federal forces from those states. So they decided to give him the electoral vote, college vote, for him to withdraw the Union forces, which he did. Okay? So after he did, and then, so he didn't run for another term. He ran for 1 term, and then they had elections. And then James Garfield emerged as president. James Garfield also is from Ohio. The system was corrupt. Why? Because now they are manufacturing, and now the Vanderbilt had the biggest railway investments, Rockefeller in the oil industry, right? JP Morgan in the banking industry. So what happened? They became monopoly, and then they had to pass the Sherman Act of 1890 against monopoly, because monopoly is where big businesses capture the entire market. for that industry, right? I don't even want to go to much of that, right? And then you had immigrants coming in now, people coming from all over the world. Now the slavery ended, more people from the UK, more people from Europe started coming. So what Donald Trump is doing, this fear of immigration didn't start today. So in 1882, in fact, they had to pass a law, the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, forbidding Chinese to immigrate into the US. Why? Because Chinese are plenty. So they're coming in their droves. That's what happens. Why? So you have now manufacturing. The age of American industrialization has just started. So somebody who was an artisan, who could make plates by his hands, now cannot compete with a factory that is making that same plate with uniformity in the hundreds. He can only probably make 10 for the day. And because that there is mass production, so they were selling at a price far lower than that artisan. The same thing is happening in Africa. Right? That's why when people want to compare me with the chief minister of Sierra Leone, I hear Americans say, oh, because he went to MIT, because this person went to Harvard. I say, these things I learned when I was a child. That's what they are teaching in Harvard. Right? So how are you going to compare Paunga to Madabio or somebody Madabio is going to hire? How are you going to compare me to Tinubu or somebody Tinubu is going to hire? No, he can't. So when I see these African guys lining up, and there is a US, there is a China Africa summit, and I see 54 president wearing coat and tie, they don't have the infrastructure, no nothing. I'll explain where America has come from, right? If you want to build an economy, and I'll tell you why the McKinley elections was very, very necessary, was very crucial, was very consequential. And I don't want to go too fast, right? I don't want to go too fast. So you see, I don't have to read books. I don't need no notes, no jottings, no. All in my head. I only need that time to come and make this presentation. I didn't even have to, go over. No, it's in my head. And I want Americans, when I go down the street, when I walk the streets of Iowa, when I go to the Walmart, they should know that that guy head is loaded. Okay? So when I say thank you to America, I know what I'm talking about. So a lot of immigrants were coming, to the extent that they had to pass a law in 1882. To exclude Chinese. So this immigration stuff didn't start today. Why? Because somebody who used to, the person who used to go house to house doing laundry for money was kicked out of business. Why? Because they no longer needed his services. Why? Because a washer and a dryer is being manufactured and sold. You see that in Africa. For example, my uncle, my blood uncle, makes pot. He's an artisan. He melts aluminium and turns the aluminium into pot. That's what he knows. He knows nothing else in life. I can't even take him out of that, because that's what he knows. You take him to any other thing, he doesn't have no other knowledge, nothing. That's how he feeds his family, right? For the entire day, my uncle probably will make 4 pots. 4 aluminum pots. So he cannot even sell in bowl. He has to take it to the Luma. That's like where other villages, way in the remotest part of the country, where those villagers come and on a Friday, or on a Thursday, or on a Wednesday, or on a Tuesday, and then he sells to them. Because in Bo, in Kenema, in Freetown, in any bigger city, there is a pot imported from China, manufactured in a factory, stronger, right? Can cook faster than that aluminum pot, and it's being sold cheaper. So that's how our farmers are kicked out of business, because somebody goes to plant rice for the entire year. He gets about, probably when after cleaning the rice, he gets about 10 bags of cleaned rice after laboring with his 2 wives, his kids, himself, everybody. So that means for the entire year, as a family, that's their labor. And then the rice is sold at 1 million yuans per bag. Right? 1 million yuans per bag. That means for the entire year, that family only generated a 10 million yuans income. 10 million yuans income. They cannot even sell the rice in certain markets. Why? Because they are better Japanese rice, better Chinese rice, better rice from Taiwan, Indonesia, being sold in his local market. Why? Because of mechanized farming in those places. So the farmer doesn't even have to bend too many times to produce 500 bags of rice a year. And it's going to take too much labor and toil for my family member who lives in the village, for all of them to produce 10 bags of rice for the year. So that was the situation when the American manufacturing, the boom, was taking place. So everybody, there was that paranoia. Oh, I'm losing my jobs. I cannot even sell again. I cannot sell. Why? Because somebody is buying from those big businesses. So Garfield became president. James Garfield became president after Rutherford B. Hayes. Garfield was killed because the political machine was corrupt. Okay, and let me explain this. So you have all this immigration, right? What's the name of Tammany Hall Society. So because of this immigration, so the political machine, there was now politics playing, right? So you had, just like what's happening right now, you have Democrats in the inner cities not harassing immigrants. So when they help them, the congressmen and Democrats, they help, immigrants get their paper. So at the end of the day, they will vote for them, right? That did not start today. Hey, Google, tell me about Tammany Hall Society.
According to Wikipedia, Tammany Hall, also known as the Society of Saint Tammany, the Sons of Saint Tammany, or the Columbian Order, was an American political organization founded in 1786 and incorporated on May 12, 1789, as the Tammany Society.
Okay, so that's just one of those societies they formed to help immigrants. Remember, it was formed in 1786, and in 1882, right? Immigrants being chased, so they were helping them, right? So that's how the political machine in the inner cities, they help the immigrants and come, and then they support them when they become citizens, and then they vote for them, right? So Donald Trump, this is what you're doing didn't start today. I just want to explain to Donald Trump that his era is not anything out of space like he thinks. Okay? Your era, Donald Trump, is not like anything special. What you're going through, America has gone through this multiple phases. So chill, or you're going to wreck your presidency. Chill, you're going to wreck your presidency, man. Okay? And then the political machine was corrupt. Don't forget, the Republicans won the war. Okay? And so it had to take time for Democrats to win the elections. So after Ulysses Grant ended the war, Rutherford B. Hayes became president. Rutherford B. Hayes, because of the consequential way he became president, he only ran for one term, and then Garfield was elected. So the system was corrupt. So the people really wanted change. Okay, they wanted change. You had Roscoe Conkling, who was the the senator of New York, decided to make it very tough within the Republican Party for Garfield to have his way. So for the party to win the elections, they came together and said, what do we do? So when I see political parties, APC in Nigeria, PDP in Nigeria, SFPP in Sierra Leone, APC in Sierra Leone, all of those political parties, as you guys are just doing politics. You don't even understand that you guys are not the only people going through the tough phases. So go back to history and see how other people worked it out. So the Republicans decided to work it out with those who didn't, the faction that didn't want James Garfield, as their presidential candidate. So they decided, okay, you guys that don't like Garfield, bring in your nominee for the running mate position. So when we win the election, your candidate will be the president, the vice president. They ran the elections, they won the elections. And then, after a few moments, they killed the president so that the corrupt machine would take over the presidency. So Garfield was killed, and Chester Arthur, who was a prodigy of Roscoe Conklin, the Republican corrupt machine, became president. So when Chester Arthur became president, I don't want to go too much into how Julia Sand wrote him letters about the moment he's taking presidency and blah blah, the condition foul and blah blah. But anyway, he decided to run for only one term. He ran for one term because the system is corrupt. People wanted change. So that was how Grover Cleveland, who was a Democrat, became president in the 1884 elections. Okay? So Grover Cleveland was from Buffalo, New York. If you are in New York, there is a little town they call Buffalo, New York. So Grover Cleveland was a sheriff of Buffalo, New York. In 3 years, he rose from being a sheriff to being the mayor of Buffalo. And because he was honest, because he was straight, he was forthright, he wasn't perfect, but he cleaned Buffalo. And then he became governor. Even when there were not hangmen to hang criminals, he had to hang the criminals on their due date. Why? Because he thought that's what the law says. And the law had to be kept. So he became popular across America. People will say, oh, the governor of New York, he's ending corruption, blah, blah, blah. He's fighting, he's trying to straighten up his state. That's the kind of guy who wants to, for him to be president. So that's how the Republicans lost the 1884 elections. And Grover Cleveland won. Okay? Grover Cleveland won. Still, that is the era. America is booming. Manufacturing is taking place, right? So it's something they can contain. It's something happening just within the U.S. By the time it gets to McKinley, I will explain what the economy was during the McKinley era. Okay? Because I didn't even go to when America was founded, how America established beyond the East and the South, to Midwest, to West, right, under the Manifest Destiny. I didn't explain all of that, how Napoleon sold the 15 land in the U.S., from which 15 states, modern American states, came out of. Okay, I didn't explain all of that because those were things America did to build itself within. Okay, I'm more focusing on America outside, but I'm explaining this dynamic so you understand where America was post-war reconstruction, now the railway, and that's how Chicago became famous, because Chicago, any town that had a port, Michigan has port, right? That's how they all became famous. Why? Because they could manufacture and then use the port to ship to other states across America. And then Vanderbilt, who was building the railway, that's how his railway became expensive, because it didn't matter how much he priced the service of running your goods on its way to one location to another. They really didn't have option. That's how those monopolies came, and then the Anti-Sherman Act of 1890 came about. Hey Google, tell me about the Antitrust Sherman Act of 1890.
On the website law.cornell.edu, they say, Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 is a federal statute that prohibits activities that restrict interstate commerce and competition in the marketplace. It outlaws any contract, conspiracy, or combination of business interests in restraint of foreign or interstate trade.
So every economy, once the economy begins to boom, you're going to have businessmen who want to capture the entire market of every industry, right? Who want to create monopoly. It happened in the US. It happened in the EU. When I explained the economic history of China also, after Deng Xiaoping became president, I will explain all the regions that were poor and what they did to get to where they are, right? And why it's hard for Donald Trump to just decouple because he has boys. And my dad used to tell me this. He said, Paunga, he said, I want to educate you. The things I'm teaching you right now, I want the day you go to America, you're going to go to America. But I want you to be smarter than whoever becomes president during your time. And I can tell J.D. Vance, I know America more than him, and I love America more than him. Okay? So when I see them being arrogant, I'm like, oh, these are just boys. They're just boys. They are just boys. I can tell where America is going for the next 20 years. Throughout my life, I've never bothered about the today. The today was the tomorrow I was planning 6, 8, 10 years ago. Right? You could tell when people said, oh, Paunga, come and work for Marabi. I said, because they were looking at the moment, 2018, somebody making a minister stealing a $1 million, 500,000. I said, no, I don't have to steal. I'm not going back. I'm going to invest in myself. I have the knowledge. I have the capacity. I only have to study the environment and function. So today, if I want to make $40,000, $50,000 a month, I don't have to steal it. I have the right. By the 1st of May, my company ad will be on billboards across Iowa. That's what I'm working on right now. Yeah, you see on screen my company, yeah, to just show America that I can function here like any J.D. Vance. I was educated here. So when I talk, I want us to listen so we can do business. Because when I tell people I've paid the price, not only for Sierra Leone, for the rest of Africa, they don't understand. But anyway. So Chester Arthur run for one completed the term. Grover Cleveland became president. The Republicans came back with another candidate, the grandson of William Henry Harrison, okay, who was the founding father of Indiana, who later became president. Okay, he became president. That's the president that died after 3 months in power. He gave his inaugural speech in a cold and a snow, and then he died as a result of pneumonia. So his grandson ran against Grover Cleveland. And Grover Cleveland and Donald Trump are the only 2 U.S. presidents who lost their second term bid, but came back and won and became president twice, non-consecutively. They win, they lose, but then they come back and then they win.